Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you. And I'm so glad you've joined me this evening for a fabulous story. So don't forget to go and get that sparkling drink. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Julia Henderson was bleary-eyed when she stumbled out of the restaurant, like an intoxicated drunk, her face red, the tears streaming down her pale cheeks. She staggered awkwardly on her high-heeled shoes towards her truck, nearly tripping over the asphalt pavement in her speedy haste to get away. The lights of the twinkling town of Bigfoot, South Carolina, were bright and welcoming. The soft puddles of moonlight congenially lit up the sky with a generous warmth, while the twinkling stars shone like polished diamonds set against a luxurious black velvety ether. Julia barely noticed the clusters of people gathered outside a nearby bar that looked like it was tightly packed like a tin of sardines. There were people standing outside the bar with fluted wine glasses and exotic colourful cocktails in their hands, chirruping garrulously among themselves. There was musical laughter, giggles, raised voices that filtered into the air, echoing against the soft breeze. The statuesque towering oak trees that fringed either side of the pavement, with their long sculptural limbs that stretched upwards and outwards, rustled their branches in the breeze, as if they were dancing happily under the pleasing impressions of this uplifting, celebratory evening, when not many were sad in heart or spirit, for even the crickets and frogs had picked up the convivial atmospheric resonance. They sang their cheerful choruses accordingly, with enthusiastic trills, like the sounds from hundreds of minuscule electric guitars. The evening held within its harmonious rhythm the happy ambience of a regular Friday night evening, when the townsfolk were looking forward to enjoying the weekend that stretched out before them. Their happy moods might have been infectious if Julia had not felt so desolate, like a lost island in the Pacific, that no one remembered even existed. As she exited the restaurant, the folk standing outside local bars and restaurants alike, on the ribbon of pavement, remained unheedingly oblivious and blindly ignorant that in their midst was a woman with a heart so broken up, so fragmented, she may as well have been shot in the chest with a sawn-off shotgun, for that is exactly how the young woman felt, broken, grief-stricken, doleful, very aggrieved. Not one of these people noticed Julia's shadowy figure, slipping through the bright lights, like a ghost moving from the pavement towards the parking bay, with the clumsiness of a drunken sailor. Let's just say her stability on her high heels left much to be desired, along with the misty fog of her own tears, that meant her vision had been robbed of its clear focus. There was one couple that did notice Julia. They had left the asphalt parking bay, locking their truck behind them, as they marched towards the bright lights of the Italian restaurant that Julia exited moments before. She nearly collided into the unsuspecting couple. They could see a distraught, elegant young woman, dressed to the nines in a stunning black dress, who looked as white as a ghost, with mascara trails running down her skin like skid marks, and the rain of her tears streaming down her face. "Oh, sorry," said Julia, as she almost knocked into the man. I wasn't looking where I was going. I'm terribly sorry." "Are you all right, love?" asked the kindly man, who was walking arm in arm with his wife, looking at Julia with a genuine warmth in his steely grey eyes. Even a perfect stranger had shown more compassion towards her than that jerk, Jack Sullivan. "I'm fine," she whispered, almost choking on her words, managing to give the couple a watery smile. "You don't look fine," said the woman who was standing next to her husband. "Would you like to talk about it? I'm sure my husband wouldn't mind if you and I had a drink together. I'm a good listener, you know. Whatever has upset you, I'm sure it's not that bad. I'm fine, said Julia defensively again, her lips quivering awkwardly. But I don't think you look fine, says the woman. You sure you don't want to talk to me? I'm sure, said Julia, but thanks all the same. The couple nodded at her, giving her another concerned look, but they ambled towards the restaurant, talking together in low voices. Julia knew she wasn't fine. That was a joke. She'd never be fine ever again. She opened her purse, and in the hazy blur of her tears, she struggled aimlessly to find the keys of her white Nissan Rogue that didn't want to be found. A silver lipstick rolls down the asphalt paving. A powder compact smashes. The mirror shatters. A lonely notebook and a cell phone thump onto the ground. Coins roll out of a weathered-looking wallet that pops open like a bust zipper. Then there are the wispy paper checkout slips that blow up in the soft gusts of wind, getting ensnared in its tricky grasps. They mischievously float down the parking bay, like misbehaving autumn leaves that just can't be caught. She grabs her things, dropping down onto her hands and knees to retrieve everything in haste, stuffing everything cack-handedly into her now bloated purse that is struggling to shut. She climbs hurriedly into her truck, glancing briefly over her shoulders towards the bright lights of the restaurant, praying that Jack Sullivan won't come bolting out, as she senses he will in any moment. She flops onto her seat, like a sagging bag of potatoes, and slams the door behind her, pulling the safety belt reluctantly across her chest. Then she sees Jack, dashing out of the restaurant as she suspected. His handsome, symmetrical face looks pinched, his lips white. His brown, anguished eyes sweep across the parking bay, and he runs towards her in his smart Levi jeans and the white flannel shirt, now covered with bright red stains. He is frenziedly trying to wave her down. He's acting like he really cares. What a joke! Right now she hated Jack Sullivan more than any other man that dared to draw breath on the face of this planet. And right now she'd gladly mow him down with her rubber tires if given half the chance. At this moment her heart is wretchedly broken, but she's also angry, furious. She can feel an indignation bubbling up inside her, like the steam from a kettle, or the effervescent bubbles in a bottle of champagne. Jack continues to wave at her madly, screaming for her to stop, his earnest eyes pleading with her. His mouth is opening and closing like a gog-eyed goldfish. He looks ridiculous, she thinks to herself, with a smug sense of satisfaction. She hopes he was humiliated tonight. She certainly was. "Julia, stop! Please stop! We need to talk! Come on, be reasonable! We need to talk about this!" What about, she thinks? Hadn't he said enough already? All he needed to ever say. The car jolted and heaved as she accelerated as fast as she could down the long ribbon of asphalt, past the oak trees, beyond the small bright lights of the twinkling town. She had no idea where she was driving. She could have been driving to the moon for all she cared, as long as she could get as far away from Jack Sullivan as possible. She robotically drove through the lights of the town of Beaufort, the second oldest city in South Carolina. She navigated her way blindly, more from natural instincts than any kind of focus, for her line of vision, due to the mist of her tears, had become ambiguously obscure. As Julia drove, she clutched the steering wheel so tightly that the whites of her knuckles became very conspicuous. She wiped her tears away with the back of her naked arms. Who would have thought the night could go pear-shaped like this, just when things between her and Jack Sullivan had seemed so promising? Seconds later she hears a loud smash. She jumps out of her skin as she slams on her brakes. She's only just gone and rear-ended somebody's truck. She then reluctantly climbs out of her truck, wearing a sheepish expression on her face, for she knows this collision is entirely her fault. That's what you get when you're not looking where you're actually going. An indignant man climbs out of his truck after slamming on his brakes. He bolts towards Julia, his rounded face wearing a capriciously belligerent expression. He glares at Julia through bull-terrier-like eyes, while his bald head shines under the moon, as if it's been polished to perfection. He swings his arms indignantly, and for a brief moment her tears dry up, as she stares at the stranger apologetically through her red eyes. "I'm really sorry. I didn't see you." "What do you mean by driving like a complete maniac?" he shouts, slamming into my back like that. "Look what you've done. Are you drunk?" he asks her suddenly, his judicious discerning eyes sweeping over her suspiciously, and he steps closer to see if he can smell any alcohol on her breath. "No, I'm not drunk. I'm sorry. I've just had a bit of a rough night, that's all." The man does not look at all sympathetic. He sighs warily. "That's no excuse. I've had a long, hard day too, you know. This is all I bloody need. They say women are better drivers than men. Ha! Are you kidding me? They've got their stats screwed up. My wife's exactly like you, always annoyingly driving into people's backsides. You know what the problem with women is? They've never got any bloody patience, always in a tearing hurry they are, always in a bloody rush to get from A to B. You women might not be responsible for some of the fatal driving accidents out on our roads, but let me tell you something for a fact. Women cause more scrapes and bumper bangs than any of us men do. Half of you haven't got a bloody clue how to park. Look what you've done to my truck," he says, examining the huge big bang on its rear. "You're going to have to give me your details for my insurance purposes." The cell phone in his pocket starts ringing. He pulls it out, letting out a loud, audible sigh. "What is it now, Rita? I told you I've been to the store already. I've got your bloody orange juice, Rita. And if you want anything else, I'm not bloody going to get it for you. I'm not going back to the store. I've been on the road all day. I'm tired now. What is that you say? I shouldn't talk to you like this. How do you expect me to talk to you, Rita, when some bloody idiot has only just rammed into my backside? What did you say? You want milk? You've got to be kidding me. You mean I've got to go traipsing all the way back to the store? How much bloody milk do you need, then?" Julia's face brightens as she looks at the man, hurriedly dashing over to her trunk. This is her opportunity to redeem herself. She pulls out one of her grocery bags and hands a bag to the man. "It's long-life milk, but it's good stuff. You can't taste the difference, I promise you. That's why I buy it. It'll save you a trip to the store." "Rita, I've got some long-life milk for you. Will that do?" "It will. Good. Then I'll see you back at home." He switches off his cell phone and accepts the bag gratefully from Julia. His demeanour shifts. "I'm sorry, love. I didn't mean to give you a hard time. I'm very grateful for the long-life milk. That wife of mine, Rita, keeps me busy, you know, like a hamster on a wheel. And the last thing I need after the day I've had is to go back to the store again. I'm usually on the road all day, so I can sometimes be a bit like a bear with a sore head. The day's been insufferable." "I know what you mean. I feel the very same way." They exchange details, and the man drives away, while Julia, in her dreadful state, finds she needs to keep driving. Her thoughts are so jumbled. She can't think straight, but at least her tears have dried up. 12 hours earlier, Julia arrived at the office with a skip to her step and a huge smile on her face. Life didn't get better than this. She had discovered she was 3 months pregnant a couple of days ago. She had agonized about what to do. She so wanted to keep the baby. She'd always wanted a child, and getting rid of the baby in her womb was not even an option for her. She had fallen head over heels in love with Jack Sullivan, so the natural thing to do was to tell him that he was going to be a father. She was not sure how he would take the news. He had talked about how one day he'd like to have children, and it sounded like his idea of one day was a way in the future. Even so, life was not like the script of a play, where things happened according to a tight schedule. Real life was very different. Sometimes there were hiccups along the way, but things usually worked themselves out in the end. It was incredible how she and Jack had met. and the seeds of their relationship had flourished from thenceforth. The serendipitous events of how they had fortuitously met had almost been written by a romantic novelist, and yet it had happened to her, just like in the storybooks. It would be the kind of story she could tell her wide-eyed grandchildren one day. "Yes, that's how me and your Gramps met," she could hear her future granddaughter saying. "By Jove, Granny, that's the most romantic thing I've ever heard." Julia remembers that auspicious day as vividly as if it happened yesterday. She had been taking her white little Shih Tzu, Cookie, for a walk one morning. She'd hurried back to her apartment when she had heard the ominous booms of thunder rolling in the distance. In a moment of abject horror, she had stared up at a gunmetal grey sky that looked like the bloated clouds were about to wreak havoc on the earth. At first, a single raindrop had landed on her, but then the heavens opened and the rain bolted down without restraint, determined to unleash its wrath on any wayward pedestrians. She knew she was in trouble. Julia hated storms with a passion, but she was several blocks away from her apartment. She was getting completely soaked to the skin, and poor little Cookie was whimpering. He didn't like the sounds of the thunder either. Julia stepped up her pace as she hurried down the road, picking Cookie up in her arms. They were being hosed down by the frenzied assault of the rain. Then there on the asphalt grey road, a grey-silver sleek-looking sports car drew up to her and stopped. "Hurry! Quickly get into my truck! Otherwise you're going to drown out there!" came a friendly man's voice. Julia had not even batted an eyelid or considered the ramifications of accepting a lift from a perfect stranger. Now was not the time to be choosy. She gratefully dashed to the young man's truck, apologetic about the water she and Cookie had invited into his car. The dribbling water from her clothes audaciously trespassed over the leather seats, saturating everything, but the young man did not appear to mind or care. "Thank you so much," she said, pulling her soaked hair away from her face. "I'm so incredibly grateful. It's bucketing down there, it really is. I don't understand. It looked like such a fine day in the beginning, but the weather's just suddenly changed so dramatically." "It's a pleasure to be of help," said the man, giving her a warm smile. "I see your dog's grateful to be in my truck. They can be a little intimidated by thunder. My grandfather's dog Jumbo, he's a huge giant, you know, but when there's a thunderstorm, he makes himself as tiny as a ball and hides away from the storm. Dogs have much more sensitive hearing than us, you know, so I guess that a thunderstorm might sound like Armageddon to many of them." "I hadn't thought of it like that," said Julia. "If a thunderstorm sounds like Armageddon, what about the 4th of July, with all those fireworks? That's got to be a hell of a scary thing for a dog." "Tell me about it," said the man, waving his arm in the air. "The 4th of July can be very traumatic for animals. I should know, I'm a vet, you see. On the 4th of July, people are busting down my doors for tranquilizing drugs for their dogs. The shelters report an influx of runaway dogs, and then there's increased fatalities on the road from distraught animals running away from the booming sounds. Oh, by the way, how rude of me. My name is Jack Sullivan, and who might you be?" Julia's face turned bright pink as the stranger studied her curiously through his steely grey eyes. Her heart almost skipped a beat, as in a space of a couple of minutes she felt a strong attraction towards the stranger, who rescued her from the storm, rather like a gallant knight riding a jet-black horse. But in this case the stranger had been riding a silvery sports car. "The name's Julia Henderson," she said. "My dog is Cookie." When Cookie heard his name being mentioned, he poked his head towards the stranger, letting out a happy woof. "I see your dog Cookie knows his name very well," he laughs. "So your name is Julia. I like it. So where to, Julia?" "What do you mean?" "Well, I need to take you home, don't I? You're soaked to the skin. You obviously need a change of clothes and to get back into the warm. I can see the rain looks like it's coming down in sheets, and it's not about to stop any time soon." Julia directed the kindly stranger through the rain towards her apartment block, a red-bricked federal-style building, basked under the canopy of some sculptural oak trees and set back on a pristinely manicured lawn, with flower beds bursting with white roses and green foliage. Jack diligently drives through to the parking bay at the back of the building, and being the gallant gentleman he clearly is, escorts her and her dog under the canopy of his large black umbrella, through to the reception area, and then towards the lift, and finally to the 4th floor of the apartment block where Julia lived. "Right, now that I've seen you to your door, I'll love you and leave you. Very good to meet you, Julia. I'm sure I'll see you around." "Thanks for the lift, Jack. Would you like to come in for a coffee? It's the least I can do after you rescued me from the rain." Jack had seemed hesitant for a moment. She was to learn later that this was due to the fact that he was in a relationship with a woman called Pearl, whom Jack had been dating for over 8 months. But after meeting Julia, he had felt a spark between them that he couldn't ignore, so he agreed to that cup of coffee, against his better judgment. "Why not?" he said, giving her a grin. "Coffee would be nice." She had led Jack into her apartment, blow-dried her dog's hair, and hurriedly put on a fresh pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. And after she'd made Jack coffee, he'd thanked her, taken down her phone number, and she hadn't heard a dicky bird from him for a couple of months. But then one day, out of the blue, her cell phone rang, and a familiar masculine voice at the other end said, "Could I please speak to the Rain Girl?" "I don't know any Rain Girl," she had asked, nonplussed. "This is Julia Henderson speaking. I'm afraid you've got the wrong number." "You disappoint me, Rain Girl. Am I that forgettable? Don't you remember me? I rescued you and your dog Cookie from the pouring rain 2 months back. I've thought about you quite a lot since then, I hasten to say. But it's clear you've forgotten about me." "Well, it was 2 months ago, I might remind you. No, I haven't forgotten you." "Good, because I was wondering if you would kindly accompany me to dinner tomorrow night. I would really enjoy your company." Julia paused for a moment, and there was a long drawn-out silence at the end of the telephone. "Rain Girl, are you still there?" came the voice, that seemed to have lost its confident edge. "Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Dinner would be great," says Julia. "Good. I'll pick you up at 7. I haven't forgotten your address." Let's just say after the first dinner date, there were fireworks between the young couple, and they both knew that they had a connection. But in the beginning, Julia had played it cool. She didn't believe in rushing into relationships like a bull in a china shop, and so her friendship with Jack had eventually blossomed into a budding romance. Jack continued to call her his Rain Girl, describing her as the most beautiful thing to emerge out of the rain. So as Julia bounced out of her revelry, she places her purse on her desk and beelines towards the office kitchen, where her friend Patricia is already making coffee. Julia and Patricia had become like bosom buddies at the advertising agency where she worked. Right now, Julia was bursting to tell Patricia her great news. It was Patricia whom she had confided in the day prior. "You're pregnant! That's brilliant! That's great news!" "But is it really?" Julia had asked her, with a hangdog expression. "I mean, me and Jack, we've only been together for 8 months, you know. How do you think he's going to take this news?" "I think he'll be delighted," said Patricia enthusiastically. "The two of you are meant to be. Anyone can see that. My God, even the way you met was written in the stars, and I can see the man is besotted by you." Julia had tugged awkwardly at a ringlet of her dark hair, twisting it tightly in her hand, a habit she adopted when she was nervous about something. "I'm not sure how he's going to take it, Patricia. I'm really worried about it. You see, he did tell me once he wanted children in the distant future, but not now. So I'm not sure if he's going to be terribly pleased about my news." "Oh, don't be so ridiculous. I'm quite sure he's going to be over the moon about it. You need to tell him tonight. You said you were going over to his apartment for dinner. Is that right?" "Yes, he's cooking his mother's beef with black bean sauce that he wants me to try." "Well, you tell him then, don't you?" Julia bounds towards the kitchen, where Patricia is preparing herself coffee. Ever since Julia had fallen pregnant, the smell of coffee had become quite repugnant to her. But she is not put off by its smell this morning, because she can't wait to tell Patricia her good news. Patricia does not see Julia, as she's so caught up in preparing her coffee, mixing in the frothing milk. You scared the hell out of me, Julia. I didn't see you creep up on me like that. How did it go last night? Did you tell Jack that you were pregnant? Julia smiled broadly. I did. And? And what happened? Tell me. Well, at first it wasn't terribly good. He went strangely quiet. The colour drained from his face. He looked at me with wide eyes. And? And what? Well, he asked how it happened, of course. I explained I'd been a bit lackadaisical with taking my pills. At first he looked dispirited and downcast. In that moment my heart felt as if it had gone tumbling down a rolling hill. He asked me what I was going to do about it. What did you say? I said I wanted to keep the baby, of course. And? Well, he seemed pleased. He smiled. Then he threw me up in the air and said, I'm going to be a father. And we danced around the kitchen. He seemed terribly happy about it. Patricia gives her friend a huge hug. Oh, I'm so pleased. Didn't I tell you he'd be thrilled? It was later in the day that Julia's cell phone had pinged with a message. We need to talk, came the message. I'll meet you at our favourite restaurant in town at 7 tonight. When Patricia had seen the message, she had hooted like an owl, her eyes shining brightly. She grabbed Julia's arm. We need to go shopping right now. What are you talking about? Asked Julia. Are you really that dim? Asked Patricia. Julia, wake up. Jack has asked you to go to your favourite restaurant tonight, so he can pop the question. Wake up! Smell the coffee! You think so? Asked Julia, her eyes shining brightly. You really think so? She loved Jack Sullivan. If he was going to propose, she'd have said yes 2 months ago. Think so, Julia? I know so. Oh, my God, this is so exciting. Mills and Boons, here we come. Barbara Cartland, eat your heart out. What on earth is going on in here? Says several people bustling into the tight kitchen at the advertising agency, sensing the ebullient mood and the animated voices that resounded throughout the office with a celebratory chaos that meant people were stirred up in the whirling excitement of the moment. Patricia, who was forever the drama queen, was making effusive gestures with her arms, oscillating them above her head dramatically, as if she was in a football stadium, cheering on her favourite team that was clearly winning, judging by her contagiously jubilant mannerisms. Let's just say, she said to the audience of curious spectators that had gathered around her in a cosy cluster, let's just say a little birdie tweeted to my instincts and it promptly informed me. Tonight Jack Sullivan is going to pop the question to Julia here at their favourite Italian restaurant. He's going to ask her to marry him. Isn't that wonderful? She says, drawing in a deep breath. Julia's work colleague's face burst into gasps of astonishment, followed by thrilled smiles. That's so wonderful, Julia. Are you sure? Absolutely, said Patricia with conviction. Methinks our Julia here should forget about working today. It's the hairdresser, the nail salon, and a sexy little black number that are on order here. You've got to look $1 million when he pops the question. Julia, you're going shopping with me. There's a fabulous designer boutique down the road. I saw the perfect black dress in the window the other day. I think it'll look sensational on you. I'm not sure about this, said Julia. I'm not even sure he's going to propose to me. We're just assuming he is. Oh, go on. Listen to Patricia, everyone had said. You go on, get shopping, buy that black number. We want to hear all about your fabulous evening. The day had gone like a whirlwind. Julia had felt as if she'd been thrown from one roller coaster to another, as if she was in a child's fairground. Thank God for Patricia guiding the way, like the bright star of David, because Julia had been like one of those awestruck shepherds, staggering around in the animated chaos of her excitable mind. Her thoughts jumbled, her stomach twisted up in knots. It was flapping away, as if hundreds of butterflies had taken her belly over as a colony. What would she be like when Jack proposed, if she was as dithery as this right now? Soon she stood in front of the mirror that one of her friends had retrieved from a bathroom, barely recognising herself. She looked like she'd stepped out of a bandbox. Her dark hair was perfectly blow-dried. It shone and gleamed. Her makeup was meticulous, and the little black number clung to her in all the right places, and she had to admit she looked good enough to grace the red carpet in Hollywood. "You look incredible! Doesn't she look incredible?" said Patricia. "Yes, you look incredible," everyone agreed in the office. Julia continued to look at her reflection from every angle, very pleased with what she was seeing. The dress was sensational. It was perfect for a proposal. "Now you need to act shocked when Jack proposes," said Patricia. Julia tries to put on some surprised looks, but Patricia is sighing with frustration. "You're not convincing me, Julia. You need to let your mouth naturally fall open. You need to gasp." But every time Julia tried to act like she was astonished, her reaction looked more and more put on. In truth, she looked like she was sitting in the dental chair, waiting for the dentist to examine her teeth. "With the greatest of respect, Patricia, Julia looks like she's got something stuck at the back of her throat and needs the high neck maneuver. She doesn't look like she's shocked when she opens her mouth like that. I honestly think that she should just be herself," said Richard, who managed the agency. "Why you women need to turn everything into a soap opera, God only knows. For goodness sake, let the poor girl be herself when the man proposes. He's marrying her after all, not her shocked reaction." "But don't you get it, Richard?" said Patricia in frustration. "It's very significant that Julia doesn't let on that she knows that Jack is about to propose to her. That would be dreadful. She must look as if she's very surprised, shocked, and then very delighted." "By God," said Richard, "I'm damn glad I'm not a woman, let me tell you. You sure know how to complicate things. It's like you're playing producer, Patricia, and Julia here is the actress under your charge. Isn't this getting a wee bit ridiculous? Over the top, perhaps? I think poor Jack Sullivan is going to think Julia here is having a choking fit when he pops the question." He pauses for a moment, shaking his head. "Well, what do I know?" he says, shrugging. "Good luck, Julia. I hope it goes well for you tonight. I'll say this, though. You look $1 million, and if your man doesn't pop the question, then he's a complete idiot." "Thanks, Richard," she says shyly, her face blushing. "That's so kind of you to say." It was 7:10 when Julia made her way tentatively to the restaurant. It was her prerogative to leave a man waiting. Her heart races at 100 miles an hour, as she could feel the nerves rising up in her gut. My God, even her hands were trembling. If she carried on this way, she'd have a panic attack before she even reached the table. "Good evening, madam," says the gentleman in reception. "Have you got a booking for this evening, or would you like a table?" "We've got a booking. Well, I have, with Jack Sullivan. It's that man over there in the white flannel top. I'm having dinner with him tonight." "That's table number 9. Come with me, madam," says the waiter, leading her over to the table and pulling out a chair for her. Jack leans over to give her a kiss, giving her an approving once-over. "My word, Rain Girl, you do scrub up well. That black dress is very amazing. Your hair looks stunning." Julia flashes in delight as she sits down at the table, and the waiter hands them their menus. "Thanks," she says demurely. "I thought a little pampering was in order. It's been ages since I've been to the hairdressers and the nail bar." "Well, you look marvellous," says Jack. "It was money well spent. Besides, you deserve a lot of spoiling." The ambience in the restaurant is electric. It's a Friday night, after all, so it's buzzing with activity. The waiters flying past them with silver trays bedecked with colourful-looking cocktails and Hawaiian umbrellas. People's voices are remarkably cheery. The smells of an Italian restaurant with its basil, oregano, tomato sauce and meatballs seem to waft over the restaurant, making stomachs rumble with hunger. She can hear the tinkling of glasses and the clinking of cutlery, and a young man is singing some Frank Sinatra, so the mood is mellow and romantic, just perfect for a proposal to bring a greater swing to the evening. "Would the both of you like anything to drink?" the waiter asked them, with his pen at the ready to scribble down their order. "I tell you what, why don't you bring us a bottle of French champagne?" said Jack. "I feel like something effervescent and sparkling. It's the weekend after all. Time to celebrate, especially when you look this good. Julia's face lifts. Jack was breaking out all the stops tonight, ordering French champagne. Patricia was absolutely right. He was definitely going to propose tonight. Julia found herself barely able to read the menu. She just stared blankly at the writing, not reading a thing. She was twitching with an enervated, nervous anticipation. I tell you what, I'll have your meatballs with pasta and tomato sauce, says Jack. I think I'll have exactly the same, says Julia. I'm starved tonight, Jack told her. I could eat a horse after everything you told me last night with your being pregnant. Well, I have to tell you, it came as quite a shock to me. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Julia could see Jack tugging at the pocket of his jeans. Damn, he says, leaning down on the floor as if to grab something. This was it, Julia thought. Oh my goodness, Jack was about to get on his knees in front of the entire restaurant and to propose to her. But instead he reaches for a tissue that had dropped onto the floor and blows his nose. Oh dear, I think I'm getting a touch of hay fever here. Julia feels her face colouring. Maybe he was going to propose at the end of the meal, she thinks. Well, put it this way, Rain Girl. When you told me you were pregnant, it came as one hell of a shock to me, he says, reaching out to grab her hand to give it a tight squeeze. I was wondering in the circumstances, Yes, said Julia. I was wondering if you would consider a termination of your pregnancy. I know it's a big ask. This time Julia doesn't have to pretend to be shocked. She genuinely is. Her mouth drops open. But I don't understand. I'm not ready to be a father, Rain Girl. I told you I want to enjoy myself a little before I settle down to become a father. I'm not ready to take that step. At that precise moment, the waiter arrives at their table promptly, with 2 plates brimming over with pasta, tomato sauce and meatballs. He places the pasta in front of them. The delicious aromas permeate the air, and Jack picks up a bowl of parmesan, sprinkling it liberally over his food. This looks delicious, he tells the waiter. I can't wait to get stuck in. Enjoy your meals, said the waiter, gliding away smoothly. Julia's heart sinks like a plummeting stone, descending into the murky depths of a sludgy river. He wasn't here to propose to her. What was she thinking? He was here to ask her to get an abortion. He didn't want to commit to her. Not at all. He wanted her to terminate her pregnancy. He probably didn't even love her. If he did, he would never have asked her to do such a nonsensical thing. What Julia does next stuns even her. How dare you, Jack! I'm not getting rid of this baby. No, I'm not. She grabs the plate of meatballs and pasta and throws them at Jack's white flannel shirt. The meat and red sauce splatter all over him, and the plate smashes to the ground and breaks with a thunderous crash. Jack looks as if he's been shot in the torso and is bleeding profusely, as meatballs, pasta and globlets of streaming tomato sauce come trickling down his shirt onto the wooden floor below. Every head in the restaurant turns towards their table. A bemused Jack wipes away the pasta and tomato sauce with a napkin. Bloody hell, Julia! Why the hell did you do this? Everyone is watching. This hot sauce is piping hot. I don't give a damn, Jack. I hate you. I hate you. If you're wondering why I threw pasta at this man, she says, staring widely at the audience of diners who are watching everything before their eyes with abject astonishment. Julia points accusingly at Jack. You see this man over here? This man sitting here, as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. He's asked me to murder my own baby. There are gasps from the diners, as in tears Julia stumbles out of her chair, running past the shocked restaurateur and dashing out towards the carport, tottering on her high heels in an awkward haste, not daring to look back. One man shouts after her, Good on you, girl! You stand up for your unborn baby! It was only after Julia had rear-ended the strange man's truck that she was startled out of her emotional turmoil for a moment, as the reality of what had happened that evening enabled her to come back down to earth with a rude awakening. Her tears had dried up, but her anger had revved up a notch or two. She kept driving on into the night, finding herself gravitating towards the off-country roads, where the embankments were liberally littered with a plethora of trees. It felt so good to be driving. It seemed to ease her mind, calm down her angst. And something dashed out in front of her truck, and she didn't really see it, even though she wasn't driving fast. But she heard a horrible thump. Oh my God, she'd hit something. This was all she needed. She stopped her truck in the middle of the road, her heart now very heavy. She was certain she'd killed something. Was it a dog, a cat, a deer? She couldn't be sure. It had happened so quickly. It was such a magnificently beautiful night. Too bad it had to be cruelly tainted with Jack Sullivan's unkind words that hung around her like an odious bad smell that she could not abate. A light breeze from the whooshing trees brushed against her face. She could smell moss and wild fragrant flowers on the air. She climbed out of her truck and trotted over towards the creature that lay in the middle of the road. It was a doe. It looked affrighted, and something seemed to be hanging out of its side. Julia closed her eyes tightly. Please God, she thought, thinking that the doe's innards were sticking out of the creature, and it was likely to suffer a slow, excruciating, painful death, all because she decided to take a drive on a whim tonight. She cursed herself for her foolishness. "I'm sorry, little one. Are you all right?" "Sorry. Silly question to ask. You're not all right, are you? That makes two of us. But your condition is far worse than mine. What have I done to you? I'm so sorry. You came out of nowhere. I didn't see you. I wasn't able to stop in time." Julia stands on the road, remaining still, wondering what she could do to help this doe. There was no way she was going to get a stone to put her out of her misery. She just couldn't do that. All of a sudden, Julia hears a pair of ponderous, heavy feet pounding through the trees, snapping twigs, crunching crisp leaves, breaking foliage. Whatever is moving towards her is thunderously fast and furious, like a roaring, unquenchable wind. And then under the magnanimous illumination of the ethereal full moon that casts her gentle silvery shadows across the road, she sees it. She gasps when she finds herself staring at a Herculean-sized Bigfoot that emerges from the fringe of the trees. At first it looked like a huge, ambiguous, indecipherable black blob, but as it approaches her, she was in no doubt what her eyes were actually beholding. This she did not expect to see in a million years. This was not a moment she would have anticipated would ever mark the calendar of her life. She didn't even believe Bigfoots existed until now. Now her view of the natural world has undergone an instantaneous, dramatic transformation. It has to shift when you encounter an incredulous, lofty creature like this. Julia is far too flabbergasted to entertain any fear. It has been overtaken by a natural, inquisitive curiosity. The Bigfoot is female. She has a matriarch energy and long, sagging breasts like pockets. She doesn't appear to notice Julia. Her attention is completely devoted to the doe, as if she genuinely cares about this creature's well-being, which is a surprise to Julia. The Bigfoot is behaving like an EMT, examining a roadside victim as she hurries to the doe's side. She's about 7 foot and 600 pounds, covered in long flowing charcoal-coloured hair that is speckled with grey roots. She has a feminine face with very high cheekbones, a leathery grey skin, and a heavily furrowed forehead. The Bigfoot is on her knees. She hovers over the doe. The strange thing is the doe seems comforted and reassured by her presence, which, of course, Julia finds strange. Her hands begin to tug at something to the rear of the doe, and before Julia's eyes, she discovers the doe has actually just given birth in the middle of the road to a baby fawn. The mother doe suddenly seems to bounce out of her affrighted state when she realizes the little fawn has been born with the help of a Bigfoot. She begins to lick the fawn all over, while the Bigfoot seems to be calming her down with her soothing words. She appears to be speaking in a foreign language that Julia is not familiar with. Inati, hasutona vinagana, ila silo shasi, homo silani, amasi fonopo. The doe that at first was traumatized appears to stagger awkwardly onto her feet, as if the Bigfoot words have somehow brought her a sense of calm that also seems to have tranquilized Julia's flustered state, as she feels an undescribable peace flow over her like an ocean wave of reassurance. She has never felt that kind of peace overcome her before, which she was later to describe as an outer-worldly, godlike experience. Is the doe going to be all right? Julia finds herself asking the Bigfoot. The creature had seemed so human. It was the most natural thing in the world to talk to her. I'm worried. You see, I felt a bump. I think I might have harmed the mother. The Bigfoot looks up at Julia, as if seeing her for the first time. Her deep-set eyes meet Julia's worried ones. She's a first-time mother, said the Bigfoot. Isafokotolani. She was about to give birth. She was crossing the road into the meadow over there. They like to give birth in the meadow, you see. She must have had a shock when you bumped into her. But you were driving slowly. No harm done. It was a little bump, but she was shocked, and so I knew she needed help in the delivery. I knew she'd be giving birth soon. She was wearing the birthing energy, the white light of another soul. Isiponi, hananukolomani, agina sinadon, ha safolobase, ileujono wan, agilamono. Julia was surprised that the creature was talking to her in a language that was being translated directly into her head, and her interaction with the creature seemed like the most natural thing in the world. The Bigfoot female points at Julia's belly. Oh, poti, hasafolobona. I see you've got 6 months still to go, she says, pointing at her belly. Oh, mortalina, oh, mogila. You're having a boy, I see. Hitina po. He can't wait to be born. He's a bit impatient. Some are like that, you know. They can't wait to get here. You know I'm pregnant, gasped Julia. How can you possibly know that? I know things, said the Bigfoot. I see energy, you see. That's why I knew the mother doe here was about to give birth. I can see the white light on your belly. I can tell the soul is 3 months old. All of a sudden, the little fawn, whom had struggled for 15 minutes to rise up on its unstable, wobbling legs, stood up next to its mother and crossed the road with her. They bounded towards the meadow. She's forgotten you bumped her, said the Bigfoot. That's a mother's love for you. A mother's love can overcome all adversity and conquer everything. Julia would never forget those prophetic, memorable words. A mother's love can overcome adversity and conquer everything. She's tired, said the Bigfoot. Giving birth isn't easy. She'll be taking some time to rest in the meadow, but then again you'll know about that soon. The Bigfoot points to her belly again. He motalana bana Ross, she said. He wants to be called Ross. Who wants to be called Ross? Your baby, of course, said the Bigfoot. Who do you think I was talking about? She paused for a moment and said, Ikalambono, hamafagana sibodo, asilono bojana, iloko bolo. It's nice to meet you. My job is done. The doe and her fawn are absolutely fine. I need to go now. My own little one needs me. And then with an incredible grace, she floated away and moved towards the trees until she was gone. And the first thing that entered Julia's mind was, did that really just happen? 6 months later. Oh, he's a beauty, said Jack, taking his baby in his arms. To think I didn't want you, little one. What was I thinking? You're the most perfect 7-pound little bundle I ever did see. You weren't thinking, were you, Jack? Said Julia, giggling. I was a complete idiot. I'm the luckiest man in the world to have such a beautiful wife and such a wonderful baby, he said, walking over to Julia to give his wife a big kiss. My life was forever changed when I met the Rain Girl. You know something, little one, he says, bobbing his baby in his arms. Good job your mother's a forgiving woman. Otherwise your daddy might be in the dog box. But be careful you don't get in there yourself, young one. I better warn you about that. Your mummy loves to throw meatballs and spaghetti around at random. With good reason, said Julia. With very good reason. Now the big question is, what do we call him, Rain Girl? His name is Ross, The baby began to gurgle with delight at the sound of his name. "Oh, I do believe our little boy likes the sound of his name." "Of course he does," chuckled Julia. "He chose it after all." "What do you mean he chose it, Rain Girl?" asked her husband incredulously. "I'll tell you the story one day, but not now. I'm far too exhausted for that." So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.